Okay, so in part one, I went over some features that you may not be aware of. I think I covered like 22 of them in case you missed that part and want to go back and watch it. So this is part two, and in this part I'm going to cover tips and tricks that I've learned to use with the Model 12 that you also might find helpful. Again, I'm breaking this into 3 videos. Part one was the features, part two is the tips and tricks, and in part 3 I'll go over my wish list for improvements and some issues I have with the Model 12, just in case you have similar problems. So let's start off with the tips. So tip number 1, I mentioned this in part 1, but you should periodically check if you got the latest firmware. And as of August 2024, you should be on 1.4.2. So again, Tascam does periodically add new features. The last one they did, they added a digital gain boost along with a digital normalization and the ability to play back from your computer from either the default tracks 1 and 2 or the or tracks 9 and 10, which is in stereo, or the main. Yeah, and I think that was 1.40, which I believe was August of last year. I'm not sure what 1.41 or 1.42 even do. It might be some stability issues, but either way, you should be on 1.42, and just again periodically check for that. Tip number 2 has nothing to do with the Tascam. It's basically how to speed up YouTube videos. So, sometimes when I'm listening to amateurs like myself, it can be a little slow and a little painful to listen to. And also even watching professionals do interviews or how-to videos. Sometimes I'll speed up the video. And I'll watch a video that maybe takes, an hour long in like 45 minutes. And the nice thing is that YouTube keeps the pitch the same, so it doesn't turn into sounding like Mickey Mouse. The other thing is, if you're a guitar player, you can slow down the speed and try to work out, a guitar part. I do that periodically. And again, it keeps the pitch the same, so you don't have to down-tune your guitar. But basically, if you go to YouTube, go to the settings, then go to playback speed, and then you can change it from either normal or to either 1.25 or 1.5. Anything above that will sound ridiculously too fast. Or again, slow it down, like I said. And I won't be offended if you decide to speed me up. In fact, I recommend you try it out just to see how it goes. So that's tip number 2. Okay, tip number 3, always use the meters to set your levels. The first meter you see over here on the right, this is the main stereo LED meter, and this meter acts more like a traditional VU analog meter, and it basically goes from -30 all the way up to and past 0 up to OL, which is overload. And if you look past 0, you'll see there's +3, +6, 10, and 15. This meter is driven primarily by the faders down here, although obviously first your level comes through the preamp, depending on whether you're doing something live or you're playing back something that you've recorded. Typically, you would always set this around 0, or just maybe a little bit above. I wouldn't go much past 3 or 6, and going a little bit into the orange is okay if you're just hitting it. It all really depends on how many tracks you have. The second meter is a digital peak meter that you see here, and it's used to set the levels for each one of these individual mic preamps. And it basically gets its signal, from the mic preamps, but before the faders. This meter typically, whoops, didn't mean to hit that. This meter typically would be from somewhere around -50 or -60 all the way up to 0, but does not go past 0, unlike this meter over here. And the line that you see going across here, I don't know if you can see it or not, this is negative 12 dB. This is the level that Tascam recommends that you record at. And typically, professional audio engineers would record around that range. Some of them even go down as low as -18. It all depends on the engineer and how many tracks they're doing. But bottom line is, the reason they do that is they want to make sure, number one, they have the best signal to noise ratio, and then number two, you want to make sure when it comes time to mix down or mastering that you have a lot of headroom. Plus, if you happen to add outboard effects, or if you're in your DAW and you're adding plugins, it's even more important to have more headroom, because sometimes plugins, and I found this out the hard way one time, they can add additional levels that you may not be aware of, and thus causing digital clipping. And I think next I was going to talk about gain staging. So related still to tip number 3. So when you're getting ready to record or mix, it's important that you gain stage everything to the proper level. And typically most engineers, let's say you're doing track 1, they will set the level up to what they call unity gain. And if you look here, you'll see that's at 0. They'll then bring up the main as well, up to 0. And then as they're bringing in the signal through the mic preamp, they'll want to make sure that this is right around 0. However, this would be, because it's a peak meter, I believe, this would be around 12 dB. So that's how that would be set up. Now, I typically actually bring up the mic pre first and make sure that's right around negative 12 dB. Then I will bring up the fader to unity gain, and then I will bring up the main. And then after that, if I'm using headphones, I'll then bring up my headphone to the desired level. Or if I happen to have speakers, a PA system or something, I'll then bring that up to the proper level. That's just the way I like to do it. And then I guess next I was going to do a quick demo here. So we'll bring everything back down. And hopefully I got everything set up right. So first, on track 1, I have this old synthesizer from the 1980s. It does not have touch-sensitive keys, but I'm going to hit a couple notes on here, and you're going to see a signal coming through, but I don't have anything turned up yet. So the way I would do this is I would bring up my pre till right around, say there, just about at negative 12. Then the second step I would do was bring up my fader. So you're not going to hear this. Then I would bring up my main, but you're hearing this before the main because I have my headphones set up to be before the main, and you're actually listening to everything going through headphone 1. But then I would bring up my main, and as I bring that up to 0, you're going to see everything's right at around 0. And again, if you're a little above in the orange, that's usually okay. And then I also have an acoustic guitar in my hand. This is a little more dynamic than this synthesizer. So same thing. I'm going to hit some notes here. And it would help if I turned everything on. I have a wireless system here. So let's try this again. Okay, there we go. So now that's at negative 12. That's step 1. Step 2. Bring up my track 2 fader. Hit a couple chords. And there you go. You'll see that's at 0. And then once I do that, I'm ready to, go ahead and, track and, hit record and record all that. I was going to mention a couple other things before I forget here. Shut this off here. So, yeah, a couple things. I just wanted to remind you. The individual faders have nothing to do with the level being recorded to the individual tracks. Again, these come directly from the from each one of these preamps. The only time the individual faders come into play is either A, well, you're just mixing, you're doing a live show, or B, if you're mixing down to the two tracks. The other thing I just wanted to emphasize too is after you settle your levels, just be aware of the fact that if all of a sudden you boost the bass way up here on one of these tracks, it's going to increase the level even higher. Now, you won't notice it here because this is coming through before the EQ, but like I mentioned in the feature section, if I set this up to be post EQ, you would definitely notice it, or if I mix it down. So you just have to be aware of that. And the last thing I wanted to mention is, actually two more things here. If you're bringing up the preamp and it's still not enough juice, and you've got this all the way maxed, just like I mentioned in the features, you have the ability to go into the gain booster, through the menu system and digitally bring up the gain. In addition, if you recorded these too hot, you got a live act and all of a sudden the bass player or whatever cranks up his amp and you realize these are way too hot and you don't have enough headroom, you do have the ability within the menu to go and digitally normalize it back down. So I just wanted to point that out. Tip number 4, bypassing the Model 12's mic preamps. This is probably more of a trick, I should say, than a tip, but some folks like to use their own mic preamps, myself included. Now, I do want to point out that there's nothing wrong with the Model 12's preamps. I personally think they sound pretty good, especially when you consider the entire unit costs about $600, and some standalone mic preamps can cost twice as much as the entire Model 12, and that would be just for one channel. The popular Neve 1073 is one that comes to mind. But again, for the money, the Model 12 preamps are a real bargain. But with that said, most people would probably hook up their preamps, their outboard preamps, to the to the back, using an XLR cable or a quarter-inch line jack. I think that's called a TRS line. In which case, if you do that, you're not only going to be using your preamp, but you're also still going to be using the Tascam preamp. So it's really going through both, which is perfectly fine, and that's actually how I hook it up most of the time. Now, in fact, it might even be possible to drive the Tascam preamp and get some analog distortion, and distortion in a good way, possibly by doing that, by going through both preamps. But with that said, however, if you're a real purist, you may want to bypass the preamp and use the one of the two inserts in the back. Now, if you do that, you want to take the quarter-inch jack and just go about 3/4 of the way in just before it clicks. And that will send the signal from your outboard preamp into the Model 12 and bypass this. And by the way, this is not unique, doing this with an insert with the Model 12. A lot of other mixers, I know the Mackie mixers can do this as well. But I'll do a quick little demo here. I just got to, let's see here. I'm going to mute this mic, so I'm going to go dead in a second, and I'm going to go over to my Focusrite ISA 1 mic preamp. It's one channel. By the way, I think it goes for about $500 or $600. I got mine about 4 or 5 years ago. I bought it used for $350 in case you're interested. But let me switch over to that. Turn this on. turn this off. Okay, I'm back. So hopefully, yeah, you should be able to hear me. So right now I'm going through, my outboard preamp using a Shure Beta 58. And as you can see, yeah, it's working, and it doesn't matter how high I turn the Tascam preamp up. So I'm completely bypassing that, and I'm strictly using my Focusrite preamp. Now, at the end of the day, too, uh, as far as a standalone preamp, like a boutique preamp versus the Tascam, you probably get like a little bit more headroom. As far as quality, maybe there's a 1 or 2% bump up, and it's really a difference if you're adding a lot of tracks that you're building up. That I have found. But again, other than that, you're perfectly fine with the Tascam's preamps. I did want to mention one other thing though before I go on to the next tip, and that is if you are using the XLR in the back, going through as I mentioned before, and using your preamp is going through the Tascam preamp. One thing you got to be very careful of, and I'll just show you real quick because it's not going to be an issue for me right now. But I read somewhere that if you use phantom power, let's say you got other condenser mics here and you want to use the phantom power, but channel 1 you want to use your outboard preamp and use this. I read that you potentially could fry out your outboard preamp. I never knew that before because it's sending power through this cable back up to your preamp. So after I read that, I either one way around it is don't use the XLR. If you use a regular, I just dropped it here. If you use a regular, if you can use a regular, line, 1/4-inch line, you won't have that issue at all. It's only with the XLR, and obviously, if you're using the insert, you're not going to have that issue. And what I actually do, I have an outboard phantom board. It's 4 channels that I bought way back. So I actually use that for my phantom power. So I'm never even turning this on. I'm always using that outboard gear, and then I'll go through these other preamps, and then it doesn't matter if I have an XLR here or not. So just wanted to point that out to you. Okay, so tip number 5, track management. I guess this is more of a suggestion, but if you're only recording 1 or 2 tracks at a time, and you're using, say, some outboard gear like, the preamps I mentioned before, or maybe you're using the inserts for your outboard compressors, I suggest you always record on tracks 1 and 2, and then move those using the swap functionality to another track as you're building up your song. And the benefit of that is you don't have to keep on plugging everything and replugging it in, and plus you can keep using the inserts. So I might do a future video on track management and how you can get more than 12 tracks actually out of the Model 12. In particular, if you're doing a band with a bunch of tracks. So we'll see if I feel if I feel up to doing that video, but perhaps I will. The other tip I was going to talk about is tip number 6, using the Midi clock to drive your Midi devices, like your drum machines, keyboards, and synths. So I know there are a lot of Midi folks out there, and the Model 12 plays very nicely with them. You can control those devices, and you can, by pressing the play button, it will start your drum machine, and if you hit stop, it will stop it. And depending on the tempo that you set up in here, you can control the tempo of those Midi devices. So if you want to speed the tempo up and have it play faster, you can do that. If you want to slow it down, you can have it play slower. And what I'll do here, just real quickly, is I'll give you a little demo to the right of me, which you can't see. I have this AKI, I don't even know how to pronounce it, MPC One, and which does play very nice with the Model 12. Now this might be unique to the MPC One, but the MPC One recognizes the Model 12 as an audio interface. And what it allows you to do is it allows me to, one, when I'm playing back, and by the way, it's all going through USB. So the Midi's going, back and forth with the USB as well as the audio. But it allows me to point the audio from the MPC One to any one of these tracks over here, either as a group, or I have everything going back as stereo, which a lot of folks would probably do. Or if I wanted to just have, bass drum over here, snare over here, and a couple of synths over here, I can do that. In addition, I can record back into the audio, back into the MPC One. The MPC One allows, I think it's like 8 audio tracks. But that's unique between these two units. If you're interested or want more information about that, there's a lot of videos on YouTube that get into that. But let me just show you this quick demo. So I'm going to press start here. What's going to happen, you're going to hear the bulk of the instruments coming through 7 and 8. And then maybe a minute or two, there's some instrument that comes through over here on tracks 1 and 2, which I have hard panned, I guess, left and right. So here we go. So hit play. And there we go. As you can tell, this is on 7 and 8. I can lower the volume. I could, add compression if I wanted to on this, EQ it, and then record all my other instruments over to here, and then record this obviously to 7 and 8. I think in a second something will come on over here. There we go. So as I said, this, I believe, the ability to point which channel to go to is unique with the MPC One because it recognizes this as an audio interface. More than likely, your other, like a regular drum machine and synth, you might have to just use the audio cables to come back in, or perhaps the audio does go through USB, but I don't know if you can control, which channel to put it through. But I just wanted to show you that. And I think when I hit stop here, I think it's going to the end of the pattern. That's why it didn't stop right away. But eventually it will. There we go. Gone. All right. Just wanted to show you that. Okay. Tip number 7, using multiple effects. And again, don't forget, as I said earlier, if I'm talking too slow, you can always speed up the video. So yeah, let's say, as I mentioned earlier, you set all your levels, you recorded some tracks with your nice outboard gear, you use the inserts for maybe some, compressors or something like that. Used Midi for your synth or your drum machine. And now you want to use some effects, and you want to use more than one. Well, unfortunately, you're limited with the Model 12. You just have one effect. Now it does give you different options. You could select hall, plate, delay, chorus, etc. On here. But what if you got a couple instruments that you want to add different effects to each instrument? You don't want everything to just go to say hall. Well, one way to do that is to go ahead and record. Let's say on track 1 you have a guitar. I'll just give you an example here. And the guitar, you want to add a chorus, so you would select chorus here. And you would go through this auxiliary 2, you would send that to the chorus, and then you would send this to the main, and you would record your guitar with the chorus onto the main. And then you do the swap, the move track, and you would move the guitar that now has chorus over to track 2, and then go ahead and clear out track 1. And then maybe your next track is a keyboard. And maybe the keyboard, I don't know, you want to add a digital delay or something. Go ahead and do the same thing with the keyboard. Record that. one thing I do have to mention, you want to record only the keyboard. So your guitar, you should mute so you don't double it up or anything else you have recorded on here. But go ahead and record your keyboard on here and then move that over to track 3. And now your keyboard has, I forget what I said here, digital delay, and your guitar has chorus. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, and it's a way that actually I didn't really think of. I was watching, it's a great channel. I suggest you subscribe to it. It's recordingstudio9.com on YouTube. He's had his unit probably, I think, just as long as I've had mine, since around 2020. And he does separate videos on all different, tips and tricks of how to use the unit. He does videos if he has any issues, he'll explain that. But he's gone through a lot of things over the last, 3 or 4 years. So just to give him a little plug there. But one of his suggestions was, and again, this was a video he just loaded up recently. He said, go ahead and use the auxiliary with the reverb. So basically, let's say this is your vocal here. So you would send your vocal to auxiliary 2, it would go to the reverb. But instead of recording it to your two-track mixdown, 11 and 12, you would bypass the main, send it to auxiliary 1, and send it out. So you would send it out of the unit, come out of auxiliary 1, and then bring it into another track. So maybe you're going to bring it over to track 2, your vocal with whatever it is. Maybe it's a plate reverb or a slap echo or something like that. And you record that over here. So you'd have your dry signal over here. You'd have your wet vocal over here. And you would mix accordingly. Now another suggestion he has, I assume this works, I've never tried it, is you could also add more of the dry signal in with the reverb, come out of auxiliary 1, and record that to track 2. So now track 2 has both the wet and the dry signal. So that was another one of his suggestions. So those are two ways of doing that using the internal effects. Now another option is, if you want more than one, if you happen to have any outboard gear, you got an old reverb pedal here, and I have a couple rack-mounted units I have from Alesis or Alesis or however the heck you say it. I have the Microverb 3. I have, what is it here? Quadroverb 2. I'll take a picture of them and show you. And then, or anything, I got an old Line 6 Pod Pro that has effects in that as well. So let's say you have an outboard unit. You could always use auxiliary 1 and send that out of auxiliary 1. Use the internal for auxiliary 2. Now, it does require you to have some tracks for you to bring it back in, which normally I would use the stereo 9 and 10. So I may have my vocal, going internally over to the internal unit to whatever the heck it is, plate or something like that, and then maybe I have my guitar is going to an external digital delay or chorus or something of that nature. I'm sending that out of auxiliary 1 and then bringing that in. Now, what if you want to record, now this is going to take it to the next level, by the way. What if you want to record 4 or 5 effects? I'll say 4 external and 1 internal, so that's about the highest scenario that right now I could think of. So how would you go about doing that? Well, obviously, again, it requires you to have some external outboard effects. 2, it requires you to have tracks say 9 and 10 available. But the third item it requires an additional mixer. Now, some folks, or a lot of folks, you might have an old spare mixer. Maybe you got a Mackie, or you can always buy a cheap Behringer mixer, or I have this old digital mixer from, I don't know if it's 2001 or 2. It's called the Easy Bus. It's got like 18 channels that can come in and like 6 that come out. But whatever, you need an external mixer. And basically what you're going to do is send the signals, the dry signals, out of the Tascam into your various effects units, submix it, the wet signal, inside your external mixer, and bring it down here, and then control, your overall return of all the effects mixed together. I think the pros might have done this way back when they had limited channels. That might have been one way they handled multiple effects. So I'll give you an example, and hopefully I can go through this fairly quickly, and hopefully it's somewhat straightforward. So basically what we want to do here, well, let me just show you what I have here. Hopefully you can see this track sheet. So track 1, I have a kick drum. Track 2 is a snare drum. Track 3 is an overhead, over the drum kit. Track 4 is the bass guitar. Track 5 is guitar. 6 is vocal. 7 and 8 are stereo keyboard. And then 9 and 10, again, are the effects coming in. And what I want to do is, I'll just explain what I want to do first, and then I'll show you how I would go about it. I want the snare drum to go into effect number 1, and that would have, say, a gated reverb. Then I want the bass guitar to go into effect number 2, and I don't know, maybe I'm adding an overdrive fuzz to the bass. I want the guitar, maybe that's a chorus, to go into effect number 4. And then I want the vocal, which is on track 6, to go into effect number, actually it was guitar number, effect number 3. I can't remember what I just said. But the vocal would be going into effect number 4, and maybe the vocal is a slap back echo. And then the keyboard, I want to have the 5th effect, which maybe that's, maybe that's just a little bit of hall reverb. Now my plan is for the first 4 effects would be external, and the keyboard would use the internal. So how would I go about doing that? Well, I would have the kick go out of auxiliary 1. Snare drum. Snare drum would go out of auxiliary 1 to effect number 1, gated reverb, and then back into my submixer. The next item, I think was the bass guitar. The bass guitar I would have come out of auxiliary 2. Now, auxiliary 2 is normally used for, the internal effects. Instead, what I would do is once you plug in a line into the auxiliary 2, it will bypass this. This will no longer come into use. So I would send auxiliary 2 for the bass out to my, fuzz pedal, which would then go to my external submixer. Then effect number 3, I think it was, guitar. What I would do there is I would use the submixer to get that signal out. And the way I would do it is I would pan the guitar hard left, send it out of the left output of the Model 12 into my effects where I could add chorus, and then bring that back to the submixer. Then track number 6, I think we said that's vocal. I would do the same thing going out of the submixer, but I would pan that hard right and go out of the right channel and have the right channel go into my 4th effect, which whatever that was again, slap back echo. Then I would, set my levels accordingly and do the submixing of how I want my effects to all sound with everything being blended together. And then I would bring that back into channels 9 and 10, and I would go ahead and I'd probably record that on the 9 and 10, let it run through its whole thing. So now I got 4 external effects all on the effects return. Now, after I was done recording that onto channels 9 and 10, I would then go and unplug everything because I no longer need the external effects. And I'd unplug the auxiliary 2 jack, which now frees up the internal effect. And that's where I would then take my keyboard and then go back and use the internal effect. And then I would also go back and put my pans for my bass guitar, which would probably be in the center. And then, where was I? Yeah, over here. Oh, not bass guitar, my regular guitar. I can't remember. Which one was I going out of? I think the guitar was left. Yeah, I'd have the guitar, to wherever I wanted that pan. Maybe it's slightly to the left. And then my vocal would probably be back into the center again. And then I'd go ahead and do my final 2-track mix down. And if I wanted to add even additional, I guess, or use the internal effects, the whole reverb on a couple other things, I could go ahead and do that as well. So that's how I would do that. I know that's quite a bit to digest there, but my point is if you use your imagination, there's a lot you can do with this Model 12 with effects. All right, we're almost there. So tip number 8, tip or trick, whatever you want to call it, poor man's bus compressor. So a couple of years back, I was listening to one of my YouTube songs with my iPad, and I was going through the Bluetooth, which I had hooked up through channels 9 and 10, the stereo channel. And I happened to notice that it sounded much better than my than my original mix. It seemed to be more glued together and seemed to have a little more punch to it. Then I had noticed that I had this one knob compressor turned up a bit. So I figured, aha, that must be doing a trick, and it must be acting like a bus compressor. And if you don't know what a bus compressor is, it's a stereo compressor that a lot of audio engineers use during their final mix and mastering process. The SSL Jeep bus is probably the most well-known. So what I sometimes do if I'm, again, I guess not mixing in the box, on my computer, I'll run my mix through the sub bus. And then I'll, basically what I'll do is I'll have, let's say I got these 3 channels here. Instead of going to the main, so all the main will be shut off, these 3 channels would be, pushed down to go to the sub bus. The sub bus would then not go to the main, and then I'd go out the 2 analog, left and right in the back, and then the left and right on channels 9 and 10. And what I'll do is, if I want to drive it a bit, I'll push the sub bus. Normally I'll start at unity gain, but I might even push it up a little bit. And then I'm basically going through the analog preamps right here. So you're not going to hear this, but at any rate, you'll see the light flash in there. I'll use the analog preamp to then drive how much I want to hit the compressor. And then, again, this is all according to taste between the 3 of these. How much I push this, how much I push this. Now you see the compressor starting to get hit a bit, whether I need to bring it back or not. And then if I want to put any EQ, I'll do all that. And then I won't record it on this channel because, again, unless you have it overridden, everything's going to record pre-compressor on this channel. But I'll use the level then. I'll come out of here. So this channel is now going to the main, and that's driving how hard, I want to hit my two-track mix down that you see over here. I could push that up a bit. It all depends on how much, headroom I want. If I'm going to actually consider this to be my master, I might push it up kind of high so I don't quite, just below the red. If I want a little more headroom, and I'm going to, master it further somewhere else, and, maybe on my computer or send it out. Not that I've ever done that. I'll bring it back further. Now, I'm going post-record, so, that's why the main is impacting that. And I guess if you're a purist, you might be thinking, oh, why, why would he want to send this out and back in again? It's going to go through analog conversion, and because it's got to be converted out, then it's got to be converted again when it comes back in. Plus, he's going through an analog preamp. And keep in mind, the first 6, according to Tascam, the first 6 are their better preamps, and these are the cheaper ones. Well, I'll tell you, I find that all those little imperfections, bringing it out, bringing it back in again, and doing another conversion, and hitting these cheaper analog preamps, kind of gives it that little bit of dirt and punch, that my ear seems to like. Because when things are digital all the time, they seem to be a little too clean. Now, another thing you could do, if you happen to have a your own I should say stereo compressor, which I do. I have an old one way back. I got back in the 90s. It's an Alesis 3630. You can probably buy one used for like 30 or 40 bucks now. You could use that instead. So then, drive this out into your outboard stereo compressor and then bring it back in, and don't even use the Model 12's compressor. Another thing you can do if you have a stereo preamp, I do. I haven't actually tried this yet, but you could run it through there as well, either right before or right after the compressor. And if you wanted to buy, I just looked this up, there's some cheap compressors out there, stereo compressors. I know the company ART, they make a couple of budget compressors. Or if you're a rich person, go buy the SSL Bus Compressor. It's probably like 12 or 1300 grand for a I think maybe a 500 series. I'd have to check. But that's what I do here. That's my little trick. Now, I guess one last thing here. Let's say all your channels have been used up. Before you don't have anything left to do this on. Just do a stereo mix, 2-channel stereo mix, and then use the stereo export on here to export the file. Then create a new song that will now become, I guess, your master, if that's what you want to call it, of your song. Import the stereo mix into channels 7 and 8, and then do what I just said. You can do it that way as well. So just another tip or trick if you want to try it, and that's it. We'll move on. All right, we're almost there. Tips number 9 and 10. So tip number 9 has to do with this sub mixer down here, which is sometimes also called a group bus. And this is for the folks that are new to mixing. I know folks that have been doing it a while already know this, but for those that don't know, so a sub mixer, well, just to give you an example, if you're doing a live act, and let's say you got a drum kit on these first 3 channels, and then all your other instruments, 4 through whatever, 7 and 8 are over here. So let's say you had your bass drum was on track 1, and your snare was on track 2, and then you had an overhead mic on track 3. Well, rather than having to, as you're mixing everything during the live show, rather than having to adjust each individual level, and let's say you had to bring the drum kit down as a whole. So you got everything set just the way you want it, but the drum kit is too loud. Rather than having to pull down all 3 of these knobs, you would just have one level to work with, one fader. So what you would do is you would send your tracks 1, 2, and 3 to the sub. So that would come over here. And then you would not send anything to the main for those first 3 tracks. All your other instruments would go to the main, but would not go to the sub. And then your sub would go to the main. So again, that's what you would do, in that situation. Or this could be backup singers too. Maybe you got 3 backup singers that you want to control with one fader. That's the way you would do it. Now, more professional or higher end, or I should say larger, not that this isn't professional, Larger mixers may have 2 or 4 or even eight buses. So imagine you're doing a major act in a stadium where you got like 30 channels and large drum kit and background singers and all that. Well, they would do the same thing. They may have the drums going to group one, and backup singers might be going to group two, and I don't know, maybe they got a microphone on the bass, but they also have the bass coming out direct, and maybe that's going to group three. Again, it makes it a lot easier for them to mix, and they do the same thing in studios with the studio console. When they're working on a song with a band. They may, even though they have all these tracks now, right? Almost unlimited, I guess, like in Pro Tools or something. A lot of mixers, especially the ones that came from the olden days when they only had 24 tracks of tape, will do a sub mix. So, maybe, I don't know, an example might be maybe you got a microphone above the snare and a microphone below the snare. And rather than sending that to 2 separate tracks, they may group them together and send that to one track. So I just wanted to explain that. Now, tip number 10 has to do with Bluetooth, and this is more how I use Bluetooth for those that are interested. So just like everybody else, I mainly will, I'll take my iPad and listen back through tracks 9 and 10 with listen to music, have that pump through. But the other thing I'll use it for, because I'm not always so good with a click track, which you have built in here, and I do use it from time to time. But I'll use GarageBand, and I'll come up with a beat or a loop, whatever it is, and then I'll send that through Bluetooth on tracks 9 and 10. I'll record that, so if it's a 3-minute song, I'll record 3 minutes worth of that. And then that becomes my timekeeper, because I'm just so used to wanting to hear a bass drum and a snare to keep my time. And then I'll lay all my, my instruments down. And then because I can play a little bit of drums, I'm not the greatest, but I can, play them. And I have a real kit down in my basement. So I'll either go down and I'll bring this thing down here and I'll, put my real drums on a few tracks. Or upstairs here, I do have a Roland E-drums, which I'll play. So then I'll do that. The other thing that I'll do with the Bluetooth is, and it's just a fun thing, is sometimes, I'll use it for karaoke. I'll take a song, say, from YouTube or wherever on the internet that had the vocal removed, but all the other, original instruments and the band are all there. I'll bring that in on tracks 9 and 10, and then, sing over it. I'll have somebody else. Usually it's somebody else that wants to do this for the fun of it. sing over it, or myself, see how well I can sing to the original song. So that's another use of it. And then, what else was I going to say? Oh, a couple more things, kind of related to that. Sometimes I'll bring in the isolated drums, because you can find a lot of songs now on YouTube where they just have, from the original song, maybe it's Led Zeppelin or Aerosmith, whatever the heck you listen to. In fact, I did one of these with one of the Eurythmics songs a couple months back. I'll just bring in the original isolated drums, and then I'll see, how well I can bring in my own, bring my own instruments in, bass, guitar, etc., and kind of play along with it. The last thing I'll use Bluetooth for, once in a while, is as a song reference for when I'm mixing. So I may bring in, let's say I'm mixing a singer-songwriter, acoustic guitar, which is what I do a lot of. If you watch my my YouTube channel, singing acoustic guitar, and then I'll try to find a similar song, that's been professionally mixed. I'll try to find that on the internet or YouTube and bring that in just to see how it's mixed, and how loud I should make my own mix and, try to get it as close as I can to, I guess, what you would call a commercial song. So those are my tips on that. And the last tip, I guess I'll call it a bonus tip, is I suggest you, if you haven't already, subscribe to recordingstudio.com's YouTube channel. He's done some excellent videos, how-to videos on the Model 12. And I think he goes back to when it first came out, just like myself in 2020. But he really goes into, into a lot of detail on things, much more detail than I went through on here, with different separate videos on issues he's had with it, and how to get the most out of this unit. So I really suggest you subscribe to his channel. That's it, and thanks for watching, and feel free to leave any questions or comments or tips you might have. And in part 3 of my next video, I'll cover what I love about the Model 12, some issues I've had with mine, and my wish list for a Model 1200 if they ever happen to build one. Otherwise, yeah, maybe I'll see you in part 3, the next video. Thanks.